Okay, the rear caliper is a little bit different than the front caliper. As you can see where it's perched on top of the rotor. The retainer is still 2 bolts on the back side. We'll go ahead and take those loose, pop the caliper off, and we'll take a good look at everything. I want to let that soak for just a minute. I'll tell you what we've got here. The rear brakes on this are kind of unique compared to the front. We're only looking at 1/2 of the brake system because the rear brakes also have the parking brake assembly. We can't even see the parking brake assembly because it's inside of the rotor. This is getting to be more and more of a common parking brake design. When I take the rotor off, I'll be able to look at that. And I want to look at that first and then make an overall decision of what I need to do with this wheel. Okay, there's our parking brake assembly. If you look at the rotor, we have the front and back side of the rotor where the disc pads are going to stop the vehicle with the regular brakes. But inside this rotor, we actually have a miniature drum brake right here. That's our parking brake assembly. Whenever you're inspecting this type of brake, you want to inspect the rotor, both surfaces here and also the surface inside of the drum. And when you're inspecting your disc pads, you want to look at your disc pads, but also you want to look at your emergency brake shoes. Now the nice thing about this is this is a total mechanical style brake system, so in the event that your hydraulic system would fail, you can push the emergency brake or parking brake and it'll go ahead and apply the brakes in the back so you'll still have a braking system. What we want to do now, this has a lot of brake dust on it. You never want to use air, compressed air, to blow the dust off there. So we're going to take brake cleaner and spray everything down, and then we'll take a good look at everything. Well, I'd say we probably have about 3/4 of our disc pad left, so in reality we could go ahead and not do the rear brakes, but I want to go through the procedure and show you how to do this. Also on our parking brake, it looks like this has hardly ever been used because I'd say that's close to the original thickness of the shoes. Now one thing you want to do, this is cable operated, so occasionally you should apply your parking brake, especially like on an automatic transmission vehicle where you may not want to use the parking brake. If you're on a steep incline, you'd want to use it to keep the load off of the transmission. So I say occasionally go ahead and use your parking brake and allow everything to work on this. If you don't, when you do need to use it, it might stick. Everything there looks fine. I think we'll go ahead and replace the disc pads. We're going ahead and replace the rotors. Our front rotors were grooved a lot worse than our back ones, but you can see we do have a couple of deep grooves in the rotors. So we'll put new disc pads on it and rear rotors, and we should be in good shape. Well, the next step is just like the front, we need to push the piston back in and put our new pads in place. Be aware though, there's a second type of caliper that you actually screw the piston back in. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You also want to make sure that you lube the contact and slide points, which would be both sides of the caliper bracket. So you want to lubricate those real well. The shipping film that's on the rotor, make sure when you take that film off, you not only take it off the disc side, but also the drum side as well. Well, I have this side all ready to be put back together, but before I do, though, I want to go ahead and take the other side apart, inspect the caliper, and make sure the caliper over there is in good condition, because if it isn't, I have to replace them as a pair. Let's go ahead and check that next. Well, the caliper on this side is in good shape as well, so what we need to do is replace the disc pads, put the new rotors on, and we'll be like new again. On the front disc pads, we had the wear sensor built on the pads. We don't have that on the rear, but there is a difference between the left and right disc pad on the outboard pad. You want to make sure you get the correct pad on the correct side. Well, we have this brake all together. Next, I want to go and put the tire and wheel back on, take it down off of the jack stand. We're just about done. Well, we have all four of the brakes installed. The next step, we want to go ahead and pump the brake pedal several times. What that'll do is that'll bring the pistons back out of the caliper bores. When we get done with that, we want to go underneath the hood and double check our brake fluid level. We're ready to fill up our master cylinder. A couple things to keep in mind. Well, one is, on our vehicle, the reservoir for the master cylinder is really underneath the cowl, so you're going to need a funnel in order to reach the fluid to it. The second thing is, you want to wipe off around the cap area before you take that cap off, or debris will fall into the master cylinder. The third is, you want to make sure you use brake fluid out of a closed container. If not, it's going to be contaminated. Let's go ahead and fill it up. Well, we have the brakes on all four wheels. We've topped off the master cylinder, but the brake job's not complete yet. The last step, we want to take it for a test drive to make sure the brakes work properly. This is a disc brake system. The drum brake's a little bit different. Let's take a look at it. Like the disc brake, the drum brake has two brake shoes and a piston. But the drum brake also has an adjuster mechanism, an emergency brake mechanism, and several springs. When the brake pedal is depressed, the piston pushes the brake shoes against the drum. Because the wedging action creates extra braking force, drum brakes can use a smaller piston than disc brakes need. However, the same wedging action means that the shoes must be pulled away from the drum whenever the brakes are released. Some of the springs are used to return the shoes to their neutral position, while others help hold the brake shoes in place and return the adjuster arm after it actuates. This is an example of the rear drum brake system. On this vehicle, there's not a lot of miles on the truck, so chances are the brakes are going to be like new. What I want to do first is go ahead and remove the drum. Now on your vehicle, this procedure may be a little bit different. You want to consult your manual to see how the drum comes off. On our truck here, what we need to do is remove both of the clips. Now the reason the clips are on here is during the assembly process of the truck, it stops the drum from coming off the truck. So I want to go ahead and just remove the clips. We're not even going to reuse them. And also on this one, it has two puller holes made into the drum. It's two threaded holes. You just take two bolts, put them in there, tighten the bolts up, and as you tighten them, the drum will come off. Let's go ahead and remove the drum. When you tighten the bolts to remove the drum, you just want to alternate from one bolt to the next so you don't take a chance of warping the drum. There we are. Now we can go ahead and pull the drum off. This is our drum brake assembly on this vehicle, and if you look at this, compared to our disc brake system, we have two brake shoes. You can see them on both sides here. Now something else too, a lot of vehicles will have what's called a primary shoe. It'll be a shorter lining material that'll be on the front, and it'll have a secondary shoe on the rear. On our vehicle, they're both the same size. Something else too, we have a lot of brake dust here. This would be a good time, if you're going to service the brakes, to go ahead and put a dust mask on to protect yourself from that. If you look at this, our brakes are like new. This does, like I said, doesn't have a lot of miles on it. There is a unique procedure for taking any drum brake apart. And a good rule of thumb is only do one side at a time. That way you can use the other side as a guide. The exception to that would be is if the brakes were installed incorrectly, and then you'd want to refer back to your repair manual. But if you were able to get a lot of miles out of your brake system, chances are they're on correct. So do one side at a time, so that way if you lose track of where you're at, you can go over and refer to the other side. Now if you look at this, the hold down on our truck, it's like one long continuous spring. That's actually what's holding the brake shoes in place. You'd want to remove the spring. Also, we have a self-adjuster assembly right in here. As you drive the vehicle, the brakes will automatically adjust. And when you service the brakes, this is also something you want to take a look at to make sure the self-adjuster rotates freely. And also, that'd be another place that you would grease. In order to replace these brakes, we would remove the spring. Our brake shoes would come off, and we would go ahead and remove our self-adjuster. And also, the parking brake is part of this assembly. We have a parking brake lever in here. The wheel cylinder is going to be the hydraulic portion of the brake that's connected to our brake pedal. But in case of a hydraulic failure, the parking brake's mechanical. As you depress the parking brake pedal, the shoes will expand and come out and touch the drum. That'll help stop the vehicle. Also, for parking the vehicle, if you have a manual transmission vehicle or if you have it on a steep incline, the same as on our disc brakes, this would apply the parking brake. Now some of the tools that you'll need to do a job like this, there's various spring pliers such as these. And then we also have a brake spoon or an adjusting tool to adjust the rear brakes. It just depends on your application, and if you're not sure, you can check with the professionals at AutoZone. They can tell you what tools you'll need. Whenever you're inspecting the rear brakes, you want to check the condition of the lining on the brake shoes. If you're looking for any kind of cracks, if this would be a riveted style shoe, this is a bonded shoe, but on a riveted style shoe, you'd see rivets throughout the shoe area. You want to make sure that the rivets aren't metal to the brake drum. So you want to check the overall condition, also the thickness. This is about the original thickness of these brake shoes on your vehicle. They might even be twice as thick as these. You just want to check the overall condition. You also want to check around the wheel cylinder to make sure you don't have any brake fluid leakage. If you do, then the wheel cylinder is going to have to be serviced or replaced. One last thing you want to check for while you're in here is check to see if there's any obvious grease. This being a rear-wheel drive vehicle, there's a grease seal for the axle. If that seal would fail, grease would cover the brake system. So not only would you have to replace the brakes, you'd want to replace that seal or you have a repeat problem. We want to also inspect the drum. What you want to look for are any cracks in the drum surface, and also if there's any hot spots, it'll be like a bluish spot. There might be grooves in it. If any of those conditions exist, you'll either have to replace the drum or have it serviced. Ours is in good shape. There's different designs for different vehicles. Just refer to your repair manual, but just take your time. With the right tools and the right parts, they're not that complicated. Let's go ahead and put the drum back on.